Good heavens, did this video take a lot of thought. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is going to be a top 10 series of all time at this point, October 2024, for me personally. I have really shied away from this video. One, initially, because I didn't think I had read that many series in my lifetime that wasn't, throughout high school or even primary school. And then I just didn't know what to pick. And I sort of fit in the SFF genre of booktube, and not all of these are within that realm, but we're just going to go for it. I have thought long and hard over particularly the last couple of weeks about what I would name my top 10 series of all time. And this is always changing, particularly now that I'm looking at finishing up some series, hopefully within the next year. And that's going to be my big goal for 2025 and probably 2026, is to be closing out some of these series, or at least closing out more than I'm starting, because this has really taught me that I need to finish a lot of series that I have. So my only criteria for this was it had to be a completed series, or at least a completed arc within a series that could be read on its own in an entirety sitting. So I don't really have a clear starting point in terms of the top 10. I have a clear number 10 for me personally, and a clear number 1, which I would say is probably my favorite series of all time to date, but all those in between sort of move up and down the list as we go along. So I don't know whether there'll be one of these in 2025 as I start to move more series or get through more series, or whether there'll be one in 2026, whatever. I don't know. I'm babbling because I'm stalling, as I've stalled for years on this video. So as of now, these I am 80% confident would sit within the top 10 series for Kris of all time. Let's just get into it. My clear number 10 is probably going to shock some people, because I have publicly said that I don't rate this author as highly as other people rate them. And there were definitely things in this series that didn't work for me, including how long it was and the pining between the two main characters. But it does make its place on the list, and that is going to be Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So why? Why does it get a spot on the top 10 list? Because the ending was friggin' phenomenal. There is a lot of foreshadowing that happens in the Mistborn era, number 1, books 1 and 2. I didn't love all of it. I very publicly said I didn't love all of it. Vin and Ellen can go. I didn't care very much about the main characters, but I did love some of the elements in these books. One being Sazed, it's probably one of my favorite characters of all time. I can make that list probably at some point. I don't know. I don't really have favorite characters, but I can probably think about it as long as I did this video and make a list of top 10. I really liked, I can't even remember the creature that was in these books, but it like molded into different beings, and that was friggin' fantastic. But yeah, the what's it called, the Sanderlanche or whatever, at the end of the series was enough for me to go, that has stuck in my head as a phenomenal ending to a series, and is one of the reasons that I am continuing with the Brandon Sanderson journey, is because of how good that ending was. So I don't know. I've really enjoyed the sci-fi series, but I haven't completed it, so that couldn't be on this list. This one takes number 10. I don't think it will ever move from number 10, or like if it moves, it'll come off the list. But whatever, that's my justification for putting Mistborn as a number 10 on this list. Now, like I said, the others sort of move up and down. I don't really have a clear indication. We'll just keep going through as we go. So for the next one that I'm going to talk about is going to be the Frankenstein series by Dean Koontz. Now, this initially was a trilogy, and then it continued on into books 4 and 5. I'm talking about the initial trilogy here. Books 4 and 5 were fine, but I really, really enjoyed the first 3. What this series did was like a different take on cloning, which, if I'm thinking about my own book, is probably one of the influences that has come in when we're talking about it. But it's been a very long time since I've read the series. It is stuck in my mind as something that I read when I was probably a young 20-something. with its take on cloning. So there was a cloning army which was basically set to take over humanity to create a utopia of sorts with these clones, but people were finding out they were murderous. It wasn't great for humanity involved, and then we had to stop these clones, from what I can remember. And it was just super fun. It was such a fun series, and I would love to revisit it sometime now that I'm, 10 to 12 years older than when I initially read it. And it's just always stuck with me, so it's earned its spot on this list. Moving along, you can't have Kuntz without King, so I'm going to be putting the Dark Tower on this list. Now, this is beat up. I couldn't find the Gunslinger for the life of me. I have it. I don't know whether I gave it to Ryan or whether it's just sort of lost in my shelves. As it could be. It very well could be. But I have the last book here. I didn't hate the ending. I feel like that's a controversial opinion at this stage. I thought the ending was clever and a good philosophical talking point. So if you've read The Dark Tower and you also didn't hate the ending, talk to me about it. Or if you did hate the ending, talk to me about why, and I'll tell you why I think you're wrong. But I really loved it. My favorite book of this is book 4. I know it has a questionable thing in there that people tend to not like, but I thought it was great. Not that thing, because creepy, but I liked the backstory of Roland. So the Dark Tower follows Roland as he journeys to the Dark Tower, and he picks up a few people along the way. I don't want to give too much away. I feel like this is a series that you really do have to experience. I really enjoyed it. I'm due a reread of the whole series. I probably started this again 10 years ago and read it over the course of a year. So that is 7 books plus the two, I think there's 2 novellas you can read after, but it comes in between book 4 and 5, I want to say. Like I said, it's been a pretty long time. But I always think about Roland as a character. I think about the big bad in this series. Anyway, it's got a spot on the list. I don't know what you want from me. This list isn't coherent, but I think about the series all the time. So it's still up there for me personally. The next one I contemplated putting on here because of the author, but we're going to go with it, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. So I'm talking about the 6 books within the Dune universe that Frank Herbert wrote. I really enjoyed probably the conversation. So this book, I would argue, could be read by itself in the Dune universe. There are 5 other books which really sort of delve into the thematics of how much power is too much, why is ultimate power not great for someone, and what does it do to the person that has that much power over people, and going through Paul Atreides and also his children throughout the series. I would, if you've only read Dune, I would really, really recommend reading Dune Messiah and also Children of Dune. It's fantastic. The thematics that you get into, I feel like God Emperor of Dune, again, so book 4 was my favorite in the series, and it's just like this big monologue that happens, which isn't going to be for everyone, but I had a great time. I read these on audio. I read this one physically and the rest on audio. I really, really enjoyed the conversations about power and corruption and faith that came through the series, and it is very hard pressed to be knocked off my top 10 list at any point, but we'll see what happens in the future. The next one I'm going to talk about is fantasy technically, in that the world building is fantasy, but there's no sort of magical elements. It's Pillars of Peace by Tom Dumrell. Now, this whole series comes in at 1,000 pages, or around 1,000 pages. So 3 books in 1,000 pages. I love the quick wit of this prose. It's quick, it's witty, it's funny, it's sort of mystery-esque. We've got royal machinations and backstabbing, and the amount of twists and turns in the series is just fantastic. Another one to be hard-pressed being knocked off the list. One, because you can read the whole thing in the size of a Stephen Erickson book. But I just thought this was fantastic, and I had such a good time with it. I have still not forgiven the author for what happened in one of these books. I can't tell you because it's spoilers, but my soul left my body when it happened, which doesn't happen all that often. So shock factor, twists and turns, the emotional beats, it was all here in Pillars of Peace. It could be quite charming and cozy initially, but again, there are some really sort of heart-wrenching moments that really get you, and I wasn't expecting it, which made it that much more impactful for me as a reader. I had a really good time with this one. Again, just another series that I think people need to experience going in. I don't want to give too much away, but the amount of like twists and turns as well, like book one is so vastly different from the others, and you follow different people. What I liked about this was how ballsy the third book was, changing character and changing gear, and how impactful that was. Anyway, that's on the list. The next one that I have here is The Aspect. This is by Mark Holloway. Now, the series of The Aspect isn't done, but the first arc of The Aspect is, and the author is now working on something different. So there are 3 books in the initial arc of The Aspect. Book 1 is Soul's Aspect. The ring light does not like these glossy covers at all. And then we have The Soul's Instruments, and then Chaos Risen. Chaos Risen is a book that will stick with me, but the reason that I like this series was how experimental the author got and how different each book was. Book 1 is very much character focused. So if you're a character driven reader, it holds your hand a little bit more. We've got Magic School, we've got Found Family, and then the end really turns it on its head as a series. Book 2, The Soul's Instruments, is a little bit more plot heavy and much, much darker than the first book. So there's an event that happens at the end of the first book which creates a much darker storyline, and that is explored in book 2. And then book 3, we actually go into like body horror elements, and again, quite a tonal shift while still carrying that the essence of the story through. And I thought how experimental it was paid off really well for me personally. And it's a series that I can't stop thinking about. And like Chaos Risen, maybe one of my favorite sort of endings to an arc as we go through. But I just think the author, so Mark Holloway, has built on his skill so much with every book, and I can see that. And the experimentation, I really appreciated diving into different styles and seeing different things as the series progressed. The next one I have here is the Southern Reach trilogy. This one might be a bit of recency bias, I'm not going to lie. This is by Jeff Vandermeer, and I recently read it for a conversation with my buddy Ryan over at the Genre Blender podcast. Just phenomenal. The amount that I took from this in so few words. So again, a trilogy, I'm going to count this as a trilogy. I know there's a 4th book coming out. It was released as a trilogy initially, and I'm going to run with it. The amount that I took from it, in again, probably it is under 1,000 pages. The first book's 129 pages, and then book 2 and 3 are about 200 to 250 each, is incredible. This is a psychological, cosmic horror, sci-fi, talking about environmentalism, talking about corruption of government and industry, of the relationship between science and government, the relationships between people and animals and the environment. It was creepy. It was thematic. I don't think I'm ever going to stop thinking about it. It's definitely up there on one of my favorite series of all time. I can't wait to get my hands on the 4th book and delve more into Area X, but it's just phenomenal. And I'll have the link to the Genre Blender episode where Ryan and I goes full spoilers into Southern Reach down below if you're interested in more thoughts, because there's a lot of thoughts. There is a lot of thoughts that we had there. The next one that I have here is actually a psychological thriller series, and that's going to be Hannibal. I don't own them. I did these on audio. I thought they were friggin' phenomenal. This is by Robert Harris, I want to say. Thomas Harris. No, it's Thomas Harris. Robert Harris wrote Cicero, which I've not read yet. So Hannibal, the Hannibal series by Thomas Harris. These books got under my skin. They got in my head. I don't think I've ever stopped thinking about Hannibal Lecter as a character. I've not watched the movies. I watched the show with Mads Mikkelsen, whatever his name is, and I thought that was a really good adaptation, and the books just stick in my head forever. I remember driving home from work, so where we used to live a few years ago, it was like a 10-minute drive to the train station, and I remember getting off the train and like I just couldn't put the book down because I had like 10 minutes to go. I wasn't quite going to make it when I got home, and I was just sitting in my car like a weirdo at the train station waiting for the end of this book because I couldn't not get it that second. Like I needed it. I needed to consume it. And it was such a jaw-dropping moment. And I can't say what happens because spoilers, but it has to do with Clarice Starling. So if you know, you know. This is a series I probably will reread time and time again. I can feel the reread coming, like I can with a lot of these actually being favorites, and that is sort of is what tells me that it's a favorite. I don't reread very often. I want to reread most of these series. That's very telling for me. Hannibal, if you've read it, if you loved it, talk to me about it. Even as an SFF reader, friggin' loved it. I've not read anything that comes close. I've searched for other psychological thrillers that I will enjoy as much. I quite like the Millennium trilogy by Stieg Larsson, which starts with the girl with the dragon tattoo. I quite like those as well, but just, yeah, I haven't found anything that comes close to Hannibal for me. Which I think I have not counted any of these. Is it a top 10? Is it top 9? I don't friggin' know. I'm trying to go through my list. Yeah, talk about that. I think we're sort of at the end here. So the next one I want to talk about is a series which is quite dear to my heart and is one of the only series that has got a tear from me at the ending, and this is the Tied Child trilogy by R.J. Barker. Now, this solidified R.J. Barker as an autobiographer for me. The character development in this book is some of the best that I've come across. The themes of friendship and learning to trust people that you wouldn't necessarily trust, or being forced into situations and just needing to figure it out with the people that you're with, have stuck with me. There is a character in here called Galeem. It's a bird like character, which just the relationship between Joran and this character, like, I don't know, in my heart always. And also, like, the end of the book still hurts. And I don't know if I'm ready to reread this one, even though I'm being called back to it. Also, underwater dragons called the Arakeen. I don't need to say more than that. Anyway, RJ Barker hasn't had a miss for me yet. I think the other series, which starts with Age of Assassins, I can't remember what the series is called. I was a bit iffy on book 2, but book 3 knocked it out of the park. So I trust RJ Barker. I really need to start Gods of the Weird Wood so I can get up to date with everything that the author has written. But Tide Child will, I don't know, I think Tide Child will probably stay on this list for as long as I do BookTube. We'll see. But I really, really love this series. And I wish more people would love it. The first book is slow. The world building is fascinating. I'm a world building guy. That's what kept me through it. But the characters towards the end of it, phenomenal. Also, one of my favorite non-binary character representations in series ever. Just read it, please, for me, and then talk to me about it, and then tell me if I'm ready to reread it. Which brings us to my favorite series. So if people say pick one, just pick one, and I deliberate in my brain over and over again, the series that comes up for me as my favorite series of all time is The War Eternal by Rob J. Hayes. Escara Helsine is probably my favorite character of all time. And I missed that when I did the book recommendations tag. Unreliable narrator who very much knows her limitations and what she's good at, and she will call it out. She grows so much while also not changing at all throughout this 5-book series. And what I will say is this: you can read the trilogy. So there is a trilogy, again followed by two more books. So there's 5 in total. They're all fucking fantastic. Along the Razor's Edge is probably the hardest to get into for people because I think Escara is like 15 at the time that we're following her. She's in a prison camp and she's looking to escape. But the relationship dynamics, the world, the monsters in this, Syracuse, which is the demon that she takes inside of her. I love their relationship. I love the dependence that they go through throughout the whole series. The magic system, so that they're called sources. They're like, I don't know, stones or marbles, and people are attuned to different sources. And I thought that was fascinating. There is a relationship in here which I was so invested in as we went through the series. There, as you go through Escara, I don't want to give too much away, but the relationship that she has with her own children towards the end of the series, it's so complicated. There are so many complicated human relationships in this series. So many cool elements. We had floating cities. Love floating cities. Or usually I'll be like, don't really care. Floating city. I'll read it. Love it. But yeah, that just phenomenal. Can't praise it enough. I I read this when I started Bookstagram, or like the first reading challenge I ever did, which I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago at this point. This series was one of the pillars of getting me back into reading. I love it. I don't know what else to tell you. Love it. That's going to be the thumbnail. Me kissing Rob J. Hayes, War Eternal. Fantastic. Will these change? Very likely. I was going through how many series I'm in the middle of, and it's embarrassing. So when I get to all of them, very likely this list will shift. But at the moment, they are 10 series that I would pretty confidently say would be my top 10 of all time. Do we have any in common? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the video, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.